What's going on, everybody? Special guest here to talk about the Miami-Virginia game. It's Jacquie Franciulli, covers the Cavaliers for Wahoos247. What's going on, Jacquie?
It's going great. How are you doing?
Doing okay. Both teams here, 3-4, first-year head coaches. There's a lot to get into. Not where these teams wanted to be here. Miami 1-2 in the ACC, Virginia 1-3. You know, it's very interesting. Virginia does have a positive momentum with that win. Miami with a disappointing loss. You know, Jacquie, I want to start. We're going to go through the rundown, but I want to start offensively. Again, they get the win, but 6 straight games, 20 points or less. Simply put, what's going on with the offense this year?
I mean, that's a loaded question there, Christopher. I think a lot of people want to know what exactly happened in the offense. Well, the skinny is there's a new scheme and there's new offensive line. You know, this is not the same offensive line that Virginia had last season when they faced off the Canes. All those guys are gone. So they had to adapt and they had to get these offensive linemen to work together. The problem that these guys had, though, was during the spring, they only had 8 healthy offensive linemen and they couldn't rotate in their starting lineup. And some of them only got to grounds in the summer. So John Paul Flores, a grad transfer, only got in the summer. So they couldn't create that chemistry between them. And actually, they only got the starting 5 out there the last week before the season. So that's what all the stuff they've been dealing with on the O-line. So that group has slowly progressed throughout the season, but they're still struggling, specifically on run blocking. That's been an area where they've been struggled most on. On pass protection, if you watch Virginia on film, they've gotten better little bit by little bit. And Brennan Armstrong has gotten better little bit by little bit. He had his 2 best games against Duke and Louisville in those losses. And you saw how the offense was starting to create that timing better, create that chemistry. You know, Brennan Armstrong was finding his receivers, except receivers were dropping the ball, but he was finding them and the balls were throwing to them. That's another area that they've been struggling is their wide receivers have been dropping passes where honestly it's thrown right to the chest and the balls just drop. You can check the tape against Georgia Tech. Lavelle Davis dropped a perfect touchdown pass from Brennan Armstrong. So that's been the problem there. Wide receivers, Brennan, this offense, it's more structured than they're used to against, you know, what they had with Robert Anae and Uncle Mendenhall. So everything is to do with timing and it's off. So it's slowly getting there. It's frustrating when you see Virginia, especially as a fan, when you see them amass 400 total yards the last 2 games and only amassed they only scored 16 points, but they had over 400 yards in total offense. So that's been the problem for Virginia. They haven't been able to execute completely, and they've been shooting themselves in the foot with horrible penalties. I mean, there was a 34-yard completion from Brennan Armstrong to Keton Thompson that was called back because of a penalty.
Yeah, it's you know, and what you touched on with Brennan, you know, I think a lot of people have a lot of respect. I know people here in Miami, a lot of respect for what Brennan's done. You know, he's certainly a good quarterback. I don't think there's any questions. The numbers aren't there this year. 7th in the league right now in passing yards, last in quarterback rating amongst the qualified guys. You know, he's over 4,400 yards last year, 4th in the country.
Right.
So what is it with Brennan? I see the numbers, you know, they're getting there a little bit in the passing, you know, less touchdowns than interceptions, obviously not ideal. What are you seeing with him? I know you touched on the drops, but, you know, how's he kind of handling this, not matching those numbers? You know, Miami's been dealing with this too in terms of their quarterback with Van Dyke, but just how does Brendan handle it? And do you have the sense that maybe something more positive is on the way?
Well, we've seen the positivity. I know it's hard, Virginia fans, it's hard for them to see it, but the offense is better, right, than they were in the beginning of the season. They slowly progressed. They're understanding the scheme. And then the staff has also adjusted. I think when you look back at the game against Syracuse, they were still pushing things that wasn't quite working. They were sending their wide receivers out on deep routes, which seemed to be counterintuitive if you have an O-line that's struggling and not be able to hold down to pressure and hold their blocks long enough so that Brennan can release the ball to have that play formed. Now what they're doing is having those mid-range passing plays, having Keton Thompson on the jet sweep sometimes, and having that ability to move the ball, having that, Xavier Brown, Paris Jones running the ball has helped move the ball, sustain the drive, and help Brennan Armstrong gain back that confidence that he didn't have quite in the beginning of the season. If you look back at tape in the beginning of the season, he, especially against Illinois, he was hit so many times because he couldn't have enough time to hold on to the ball. So what happened was it looked like his inner clock was off. So even when he had time, he felt he didn't have time. So that was ruining all the timing on that offense. Now he's starting to get back that confidence. He's having more confidence in the pass protection on the O-line. We're seeing new guys on the O-line come up. Jonathan Leach has been playing with an injury on one of his hands. He's been playing with a cast. He's starting to play better. Noah Josie had his first real sustained appearance on the line at guard against Georgia Tech. He had a really good, he actually led in pass blocking for Virginia, according to Pro Football Focus. So all those pieces are coming together. We also are seeing flashes with the wide receivers. Dontavian Wicks had one of his best touchdowns. It looked like Dontavian Wicks from last season, where he caught the ball, nice pass for Brennan Armstrong, and did an individual effort to move into the end zone. With Brennan, he's a competitor. He's always going to put everything on the line for you. What he needed to learn was to work within a system, also become a better game manager. Sometimes your best play is to throw the ball away. Sometimes the best play is for you to slide. Be aware where your chains are. Don't go for the extra 2 or 3 yards after you get a first down. Fall down, go from a slide. That's where some of the fumbles have come in. So those are the things that Brennan is working on. And as a competitor, he is frustrated. He's told us, I am frustrated. But you can see that he's getting back. And you saw him on the sideline against Georgia Tech, that it didn't seem that he was as frustrated on the sideline during that game. He wasn't, against Louisville, you saw him slam the ball on the ground, which isn't a characteristic of Brennan Armstrong. And it looks like the bye week really has helped Brennan a little bit.
Yeah, certainly interesting. Like I said, certainly there's a lot of potential in there. A lot of people are excited about him coming into the year and the abilities there. So it'll be interesting. I think Miami's pass defense has been hit or miss. They've certainly given up big plays. They're trying to cut that down. So it'll be interesting to see how Miami matches up. You touched on with Keton, he comes in second in the ACC in receptions. It seems like he just kind of keeps getting better each year he's been there. Where is he better at? And one thing that I'm just looking at the top 3 guys there, good size, at 6'5", 6'2", 6'7" in terms of their top receiving targets. And that will be a challenge for any team, but in particular with Thompson, what are you seeing? What's he better at maybe than a year ago?
I think he's better as a wide receiver. Don't forget, he was a quarterback. He came out to Virginia to compete for the quarterback's job, then got hurt. Brennan won the battle, so he was the quarterback. And then last year under Anai, he didn't even have a position. He was Mr. Football. He was a football player on the depth chart. Now he's really honed down on his wide receiver. So he's worked on route running. He's worked on his breaks. That's been the big thing for him. He's still learning. You still see that he's still adjusting to a new position, but he's a very versatile weapon, which is what I kind of touched on. Like, yes, he can catch the ball, but what I like about him, and I wish Virginia actually did this a little bit more, was that he can utilize him and the running game. He is a guy that will fight for every single yard. He is not an easy man to bring down, and I think Miami can remember that. He's not. He's also a very good blocker. Again, Miami can remember how he held Brennan Armstrong on one of those long first down runs he had before they scored against the Canes last year. So he's an overall good player, and that's what he brings. He has this toughness that even though his team is not playing well, he will still fight for that 2 or 3 extra yards, and there's usually 2 or 3 defenders. And what they did against Georgia Tech is they used him in a couple of mismatches in the end zone. And what they did was they created these cross routes, and they said, okay, we're going to match up him with the Georgia Tech DB, and we know he's faster than him, so we're going to make sure that we're going to use that to our advantage. So that's what Keton brings, and he is the most consistent guy. He still has some drop issues, but most of the time when you look at the snap count for Keton Thompson, he has so many snaps. The guy is tired. And that's something that Tony Elliott is saying. He wants the younger receivers to step up, because right now, Dontavian Wicks, Lavelle Davis, and Keton Thompson are getting a lot of reps. And Keton specifically is getting plenty of reps right now.
Jacquie, just moving it on with the run game, 156 yards against Georgia Tech, 6 the week before against Louisville. Certainly that's the improvement you're liking to see. What you notice in particular with that? And maybe it's to what you're speaking of with the offensive line, but what do you notice with the run game and essentially how important that is to help the pass?
Well, Virginia actually has a run game that isn't named Brennan Armstrong this year. I know if you follow Virginia last year, they had running backs, but it was really rare they actually allowed the running backs to run the football. So guys like Paris Jones, a former walk-on who earned a scholarship at Virginia, he's one of their main rushers. Mike Collins missed a game against Georgia Tech because he was injured, so he's probably still questionable. We actually get Tony Elliott on Tuesday, So we're not sure what his update is at the moment. And then you have freshman Xavier Brown. He is one that Virginia is really excited about. He can move so much within a small space to get those, everyone talks about those big plays the running backs have. They say, oh, that's a great 20-yard run. It's those 6-yard runs that Xavier Brown will get, just moving the ball a little bit so it can help the offense. And that's what he does. He finds those little yardages to move the chains. And that's what Xavier Brown brings. Paris Jones is a good, tough runner. The big difference is that Virginia wants to run the ball. Sometimes they maybe push the run a little bit more than they should in certain instances, but most of the time they're going to try to establish some sort of run so that they can keep the ball. So that's basically the difference than the Miami fans are going to see from this Virginia offense than the Virginia offense last year, where it was just pass heavy and they're going to go for the air. It was a rarity that you see them go to the ground unless Brennan Armstrong is running it. Now you're seeing other guys, running backs, running the ball. And you're also seeing Brennan Armstrong getting more comfortable at rushing the ball as well. He's actually had his best game on the ground against Georgia Tech, where you saw him being more decisive in that role as well.
And then, like I said, the rushing offense was much better, run defense much better last week than the week before. Your take on that, and maybe just this defense in general, just kind of looking at it, certainly from a Miami standpoint, they're going to a game where they turn the ball over 8 times. Virginia comes into the game tied for 4th in turnovers gains, but you might be having their backup quarterback. So I know Miami fans are very curious to know what kind of defense Virginia has. Maybe your overall thoughts on that, and maybe how they progressed, maybe early on or not progressed to where they are now.
Oh my goodness. It's a 180 from what Miami fans saw this defense last year. Coach John Rudzinski, the new defensive coordinator for Virginia, has really turned things around. The defense is the strength of this team. Their defensive line has a lot of depth. That's one of the matchups that I'll be keying on when you kind of previous game is Miami's O-line versus that very, very talented Virginia D-line. What the staff did here at Virginia was to go through the transfer portal and pick up some nice added depth there, including Cam Butler from Miami, Ohio. He's been able to, get more quarterback pressures. Chico Bennett, a transfer from Georgia Tech, was injured last season. He's been able to get to the quarterback a few times. He's actually the ACC defender of the defensive lineman of the week this week. He's done a good job for Virginia as well. And if you look at how John Rudzinski lines up his defense, is a little different. They actually have 3 safeties lined up. So that allows them to use their field safety row to kind of help navigate some rushing defenses, which is for example, Antonio Clary kind of roams around. And that has helped them shore up their rushing defense. And Nick Jackson obviously has returned. He's the AC, he was the AC leading tackler last season. He's also been a big part of why this defense is successful. Him and the secondary, Antonio Clary and Jonas Sanker, have a good kind of chemistry, kind of lining everybody up, seeing what the offense is doing. And that's been a big key to this, is that the communication between them has been much improved. And also, it's simpler. Last season, this defense, these guys would go out there and have to think about it. And then once you think about it, what happens. You miss a tackle. So this time, John Rudzinski, I love this joke. He said, I tried to simplify it. It's like, I don't want to overcomplicate when I'm communicating with my wife to make sure we're on the same page. I don't want these guys to overcomplicate it as well in their communication. So that's what's different. It's simpler form, but they create a good pass rush. But what's great is they have complementary football within the defense. Last year, you saw the secondary get beaten several times, but a lot of their problems wasn't the secondary. It was the linebackers not fitting their gaps, and they weren't creating pressure. Now they're able to create pressure. Their linebackers are fitting their gaps a little bit better. Some of them better than others. There's a couple of young guys in there. But then you also have a good talented secondary. A couple of guys on this defense, Miami fans will know as well, a couple of South Florida guys and a couple of Florida guys on this defense, including Antonio Clary, who's from Jacksonville, and Deshaun Perry, who's from Gulliver Prep. So those are some of the guys that Miami fans might know.
Yeah, you touched on the pass rushing a little bit there, and that's certainly something that stands out to me in terms of numbers. Last year, last in the ACC in sacks with 18, already surpassed that number. They're third in the ACC with 23 sacks. Can you touch more on that? And I know you touched on the defensive line, but maybe how important that's been. And you touched on the defense. We talked about how the scoring hasn't been there the last 6 games, not over 20 points, but they've won a couple of those games. Certainly the defense is doing their part there to keep teams down, even if it's in low scoring. But sacks in particular, Jackie, how important is that? And certainly, once again, Miami coming off a game where they had turnovers and quarterbacks were a part of that, getting sacked, and obviously Van Dyke going down. So I know that'll be big from Miami's standpoint.
Yeah, this game will definitely be who can keep a hold of that ball, because Virginia also hasn't done well. They've averaged, I think, 2 turnovers a game at least. So yeah, so what this Virginia defense has allowed is they bailed out all the phases of the game, because Virginia's offense isn't the only issue. Their special teams has also been an issue for Virginia. So what this defense has done is, let's say when Brennan Armstrong threw that pick, the defense came in and was able to stop it. When the punt was blocked for Virginia against Georgia Tech, the defense got to stop. That's what this defense has allowed Virginia, is that they come in here and bail them out in situations. Now, at times, obviously, if you look at the record, it hasn't happened all the time, but it has given them a chance to stay in games. The perfect example is Syracuse. That was a game that the defense allowed UVA always a shot at winning the game. And then if you look at Louisville and Duke, those are the 2 outliers where we didn't see the defense perform as well. Against Duke, it was penalties that cost them. Actually, if you look at the first 2 scoring drives for Duke, the first one, they had 30 yards of penalties that they just gave away to Duke, and Duke just scored after it because they marched down the field. And then against Louisville, it just was not the defense we were used to seeing. It was like there was one particular play when the quarterback faked them out and then ran for the touchdown, and it was just like that zapped the energy off the team. This came off of Brennan Armstrong fumbling in the red zone, so pretty back-to-back. And it just took the energy out, and they didn't have 1 sack or tackle for a loss. They bounced back after the bye week against Georgia Tech in a big, big way. And that was a defense that we were slowly seeing was a defense that did create the pressure. And like I touched on the defensive line, you're going to see Aaron Famui and Jameel Carter as your 2 guys in the center, but you're also going to see guys like Ben Smiley. You're going to see guys like Michael Diatta. On the edge, you're going to see guys like Cameron Butler and Chico Bennett both start, but then they have Jack Camper and Paul Akir, 2 very talented guys. And what they've been able to do is they rotate guys. They have a system where they don't want guys to be tired. So they have a rotation of, okay, how many snaps is this guy is? Okay, let's rotate another guy in, and they don't miss a beat. That's been what the key has been for Virginia, is that they've been able to rotate guys like that and stay fresh so they're able to pass rush. And again, when you have the ability to rush the quarterback and then have the confidence that your linebackers are going to fit those gaps and the secondary is going to do your job, you're going to have confidence in the whole defense, and that's why they're performing. But yeah, that's D-line is definitely different. A lot of familiar names, like yes, Chico Bennett and Cameron Butler and Paul Akir are new names, but Aaron Famui and Jameel Carter are names that should be familiar if you're looking at the Virginia roster.
Certainly great insight, Jackie. I'm going to let you get going. Like I said, time's valuable, so I appreciate you taking the time to talk about this game.
Thanks so much for having me, Christopher.